Welcome to the world of deep tech. A few weeks ago, we looked at the key terms of licensing agreements. Here, we will look at how the financial terms of licensing are determined in the context of commercializing advanced technologies. Recall that the financial considerations paid by the licensee include an upfront payment, a royalty based either on the sales of licensed products or based on the number of users, and equity in the company. They also include revenue share from sub-licensing, grant fees, and reimbursement of the cost of patent prosecution. Now let's look at how we determine the value of the IP and these numbers. Unlike tangible assets, intangible assets have value because of the future they can enable. So the value is based on the risks involved and the context in which the value is being determined. A platform technology that requires time and money to be translated into tangible products, for example, carries higher risk compared to IP that can directly go into a product. The licensing agreement could be negotiated in the context of growth, where we are building something tangible out of the IP either within a startup or a large company. It could also be negotiated in the context of liquidation or monetization, or in the context of strategic purposes. The strategic purposes could be a defense against lawsuits or competition, or a strategic collaboration between the licensee and the licensor. Now, let's look at how we can value the IP and set the financial parameters. The simplest and obvious way is to determine the value of the IP based on the cost of creating or replacing the IP. These costs include costs of research and development and cost of protecting the IP. There are several challenges with this approach. The first one, of course, is that the prior art at the time the IP under license was filed is different from the prior art that will exist at the time when any replacement technology will be developed and patented. So the value of replacement isn't the same as the IP under license. This approach doesn't take time value of money into consideration. So costs incurred a few years ago isn't the same as the cost that will be incurred few years hence. The cost-based approach is also not forward-looking and doesn't capture either the risks or the context of commercialization. There is also an inherent sunk cost fallacy associated with this approach, especially from a licensor perspective. So it doesn't reflect the value of the IP in the context. Nevertheless, it's useful for the licensor to know the costs incurred to develop and protect the IP to set the baseline for the negotiations. The next method to value the IP is the DCF method that we saw in our last video with a few changes. As you recall, we use the free cash flows to equity investors as the basis of discounting there. In the context of IP valuation, this doesn't make sense as the free cash flows don't accrue to the IP owner. So, we can use either the net sales or operating profits as the basis. If you recall from the previous video, operating profits are sales revenues less cost of goods sold and operating expenses such as sales and general administration and management costs. Given that licensors don't have any say or insight into these operating expenses, licensors prefer to use net sales as the basis. Whichever basis is used, care should be taken in handling the sticky issues we discussed in part 1. The forecasting period for the DCF in case of IP valuation is the useful economic life of the IP. It's based on the obsolescence rate of the new technology in a particular industry. Barring some exceptions like new users or continuations, intellectual property like patents have very little terminal value. The discounting rate used will of course vary depending on the maturity of the technology and the time and money required to take it to the market. It is also based on the economic life of the technology. Typical discount rates used for IP valuation range as wide as 80% for early stage technologies to 15% for product stage technologies. Once the IP value is ascertained, the question becomes one of how to divide the value between the licensor and licensee. Here, there are three different approaches in decreasing order of accuracy. The first one is a combination of benchmark with DCF. The second one is based on rules of thumb. And finally, the least reliable method is based on industry averages. Benchmarking involves finding similar licensing agreements and basing the rates on those agreements. Key sources for finding such agreements include Royalty Source, Royalty Stat, and Clarivate. Majority of data on these sites pertain to agreements from North America and Europe, with only sparse coverage of agreements from Asia, South America, and the rest of the world. Other sources of information include press releases regarding major collaborations, filings with regulatory agencies like SEC on EDGAR database, and LES. LES International has branches across many parts of the world, and their publication, La Nouvelle, discusses various issues surrounding licensing agreements across different industries on a regular basis. But in general, benchmark data is hard to come by due to the limited number of licensing agreements and private nature of these transactions. Moving on to the second method of rules of thumb, the most popular one is the 25% rule that states that the licensor gets 25 to 33% of the operating profit and the licensee gets the remaining 67 to 75%. This number is adjusted downward to take care of risks such as early stages of the technology, time and resources required from IP to tangible revenue, and regulatory risk. Similarly, the number is adjusted upward based on the increase in value due to closeness to market, maturity, and strategic importance of the technology to the licensee. While this rule originates mainly from allocation of proceeds in infringement cases in the US, empirical evidence from various industries seems to fit this rule even in the context of technology commercialization. While the calculations are arrived at based on operating profits, in general, the final numbers in the licensing agreement are correlated back to net sales to avoid the issues with using operating profits that we saw earlier. Finally, the average composite royalty rates for different industries over the past 3 years is shown here. As you can see, they are remarkably consistent. However, as with all averages, they hide a huge variation in the royalty rates within the industry. On the positive side, these numbers are more readily available than the benchmark agreements and can be used for reality check while arriving at the financials of the transaction. Putting it all together, there is no ideal way to arrive at the quantitative value of the IP being licensed. We can arrive at a range of estimates before starting the negotiation on financial terms. First and foremost, we need to understand the context of the agreement. We should also understand the quality of the IP under license. The royalty rate should be split between registered IP and the know-how transfer, so that even if the patent is not filed, granted, or invalidated in a territory, the licensor can generate royalty based on the know-how transfer. Cost-based approaches can provide a baseline but not ideal way to determine the value of the IP. It makes sense to use rules of thumb, benchmarks where available, and DCF to come up with the range of values and use them judiciously while negotiating the financial terms. Like with all financial transactions, the final value and financial terms are based on a willing licensor and willing licensee, but the more informed the parties, the more the agreement will be satisfactory to both parties. In closing, this video covered the methods to value IP and gave a brief overview of the advantages and disadvantages of each of them. Before you go, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Thank you.